leader of the 3rd Squad of the Shinsengumi.
Shizo Hijikata, assistant leader of the Shinsengumi. Okita, I recommend that you stand down. That man over there, the infamous Batosai, the mask. People's wolves are here. It's the Shinsengumi.
What is up, guys? DT Ninja here to give you guys my Rurouni Kenshin Hokkaido Arc Chapter 49 review. Alright, guys. So, we're going to get right into the chapter and go right into the magazine scans. This is Chapter 49. An important visitor, a busy visitor. Basically, this chapter is an informative chapter, but there are a lot of interesting points. So, as I read this chapter more and more, I seem to find new things and learn new interesting things. So that's what I'm here to share with you today. So we are going to go into the main points of the chapter, but also some very interesting things I noticed. So let's get to it. All right, so interesting point number 1. The first thing I noticed is this. Let's zoom in here. You can see this carriage right here with the horses. This scene is very similar. It looks very similar if you know the original Kenshin, chapter 56. And why do I say that? Look here, an important visitor who is holding on to a cane. So this is almost the exact same scene as when Toshimichi Okubo is assassinated. So you can see he's in a carriage, he's got horses, and here he's even holding on to a cane. Like I said, he's very important in the Meiji government. He actually takes over Okubo's position after he's assassinated. So, yes. And then below here, this is Mount Hakodate. So he arrives in Hakodate. You can see there are some carriages for this man. There's 3 of them. So one of them is the actual person, which is Aritomo Yamagata, and this is the real one because he actually has a cane, so he has a hard time walking. And so he has 3 of them because 2 of them are body doubles. And remember when Okubo was assassinated on May 14th, 1878, was because of, Sojiro, right? And it was because he was all alone. He didn't have that security and protection. So this is Aritomo Yamagata's, choice. It's just his way to prevent an assassination. But I found that very interesting that we got 3 carriages there, and that's why, because those are body doubles of Yamagata. And before that, I think it was in chapter 41 or 40, we see one of the body doubles got beheaded. So we know he's got more than just 2 there. But here it just shows 2 of them. So I found that very interesting. So that's the first one. So Yamagata's arrival to Hakodate, very reminiscent of chapter 56 and Okubo's assassination. Now, like I said, there are 3 carriages. It represents his body doubles and him. But also, Yamagata has the same position in the Meiji government as Okubo as well, the Secretary of the Interior or Internal Affairs. All right, let's get to the next page. We got Tamoto Photo Studio here. You got some, Goryokaku. You got Hiketsuhi. So these are some images where we've been. We've been to Goryokaku. That's where Itakura is. And Hiketsuhi is where the Shinsengumi, Saito, Nagakura, and Kenshin all met there for the gathering. So now we have Kenshin meeting Nagakura. And what's interesting about this is they talk about Saito. So we kind of skipped around, but here's the second page. Saito is in the hospital, resting up a bit after his battle with Ito. and it says basically he's going to rest a little bit. And then you get the shock factor of Kenshin. Kenshin's face is shocked. What's interesting about this one is that there are two kind of scenes that are very similar to this one. So the reason why he's shocked is not because Saito is in the hospital. The real reason is actually very interesting. So we're going to get to that in a moment. So basically Nagakura says, Saito's in the hospital and he's going to rest a bit. And then it goes on to talk about Saito. So Saito is a main key point here, especially for Kenshin. Kenshin goes on to talk about ever since Saito, so it shows him walking. This was when he's walking towards Hiketsuhi. Remember, it's a hidden place, so he's walking there before the gathering, and he always felt there was something wrong. You can see the sword is missing there. That's one thing. And another thing, it just feels off. Something feels off about Saito, and he says he's changed. But here, this is where Nagakura is like, what are you talking about? He hasn't changed at all. The person who's changed is you, Himura. You are no longer Batosai the Manslayer. You are a wanderer who doesn't kill. And look at his eyes, just like in total shock, like, oh my gosh. I didn't even consider that. I always thought it was part of me, but you're right. He's gone. I am Kenshin Himura now. I'm no longer Batosai the Manslayer. So again, that goes right back to that scan that we saw at the beginning with him and the shocked face. So right there, it's the same scan. You can see it right there. And we're going to see that shocked face again towards the end. So I like how they showed it not only in this scene with Nagakura, but it also shows it towards the end. And then it goes on to tell him, basically Kenshin's like, oh, that's why he refused to fight me, because he wants to fight, Batosai, and I'm no longer Batosai. And so he basically, Nagakura says, he's never changed. He won't ever change, it seems. And so there's kind of a look of concern on Nagakura's face. And then it goes over kind of the battles that, Saito has been through. And you see him getting his arm broken by, you can see it right there, by Itakura. You see some of his other fights, like him killing Usui. And then it goes on to say how he's the Wolf of Mibu and that he's going to live his life like this through Akusokzan. And then Kenshin says, persevering, living this way without ever changing. It sounds familiar. I know what it's like. But then Nagakura is like, well, that may be true, but I know him better than you because, he's living his life like Toshi-san. Toshi-san is Hijikata. So he goes on to say, what's beyond persistence, and I know this, is a glorious death. And then it shows the beautiful portrait of Hijikata Toshizo, and we see it here. And then what I notice about this is not that it's just talking about the glorious death, which Hijikata did, died a glorious death, but also these flowers. These flowers next to him represent death. So these are chrysanthemums, they represent death, and these are lilies right here. These are flowers that represent death. So not only does it say a glorious death, but it also represents death. So I noticed that at first I didn't realize. I knew flowers were representing death, but I didn't know what specific flowers they were. But anyways, I wanted to point that out. All right, let's get to the next page. We got basically Kenshin and Nagakura still talking about Toshi-san. And Kenshin is reminiscing about his battle with him in Kyoto. And then this is interesting. Nagakura says Toshi-san was something else. A very honorable man. Man, I wish he were still alive. He could, drink with us and, enjoy life with us. So that was a really cool scene. You get Kenshin going back to the, Batosai and Kyoto. And then you also got Nagakura thinking back to his old days. So it got them both very, thinking about the past. I thought that was great. And then we get these scenes, kind of playful scenes. Nagakura basically saying he could have drank, got drunk with us and, enjoyed with us. And it shows Kenshin being pissed off by Nagakura. Shows Abe also. So I like that about it. But then it goes on to say, I know this more than anyone because Saito lives a life like Toshi-san, and if he does that, there's no stopping him. That's why he's never changing. I don't want to see that for him. I don't want to see that death happen. We get Tomoto basically saying, don't talk about death. So then we have someone arriving at the photo studio. While they're still talking, a man comes in with the cane, and yes, it is Aritomo Yamagata. And he basically says, I have respect for this man, but as a political figure, and remember, he is a political figure in the Meiji government, a very powerful man. He as in Hijikata Toshizo, was a spiteful man who prolonged the Boshin War. Basically, he's saying his side could have surrendered, but he was, as you say, he wanted to die fighting, is basically he feels he's a spiteful fool because he prolonged the war, even though he died fighting. Then we got the reunion with Kenshin, and you got another shock factor here, going back to the first page again. See, like I said, I love the fact that it connects them all. Now, it's not quite the same, but still, it's pretty close. And then this is interesting. So it shows Kenshin's house, the prairie house, right? So that means we went from Tomoto Studio right to Kenshin's house. So they automatically went there, they drove there, and yeah. So just, that's how they ended up here. This scene right here where they're talking important matters, you got Kenshin, Nagakura, Sano's in there, and you got, obviously, Aritomo Yamagata. Yamagata basically shows his respect towards Homura and Nagakura because he knows them. And then he talks about this guy. Who are you? And he's like, I'm Kenshin's best friend. You got a problem with that? I'm Kenshin's best friend. And so then Yamagata realizes other people are watching. Obviously, Kenshin's wife is there. And then, Kaoru basically talks about how he's the Secretary of Interior, how he's the most powerful man in Japan right now. Here, he talks about having body doubles, and we go back to Okubo's assassination. Remember at the beginning when I was talking about how this is reminiscent of the Okubo assassination? This is what I'm talking about. Look at this. Okay, Okubo assassinated here. And then you got the carriage here. So, like I said, the fact that he mentions it and the realizing why he needs body doubles, that just goes back to the carriages, right? Those are his doubles. I also thought it was really funny that Sojiro here is basically the perpetrator that killed Okubo, and he's in the same room as, and he's basically asking the Jupongatana, should I apologize? And then you got Kenji like, what's going on here? So it's pretty funny. All right, guys, moving on to the next page, we see Eiji Mishima on the outside of Himura's family home in Hakodate. You see another military officer here, and you can see the look on Mishima's face is that of concern. He's not really sure what's going on, but it's interesting to see nonetheless. Let's look closer here. Aritomo Yamagata basically says, I've come here to Hakodate to render a verdict. And you see the faces of Nagakura, the eyes of Nagakura, Kenshin, and Sano. So now they realize the reason why he came, and it's talking about the Kinkaku Heki. I realize, what you guys have done over the last, few weeks or so, where, struggles with the Kinkaku Heki. It talks about, not only the battles they've endured, but also kind of the the idea of an ikitosen. He focuses on the idea of an ikitosen, and an ikitosen is basically a fierce warrior with the strength of 1,000 men. So basically, he says, as an individual, I can respect the idea of an Ikitosen, but as a political figure, I cannot value these outdated kind of warriors, so I have no use for them. So he goes on to say the Meiji era, with its technology, with firearms and the military, we have no use for this outdated, warriors kind of thing. So basically, Sano says, what are you going to do then? And he's like, I'm going to destroy them. And he goes on to talk about the Meiji era and how the development of Hokkaido, the resources are great. So like I said, the outdated ferocious warriors of Kenkaku Heki are not needed in the Meiji era. However, he does recognize that the growing and the raising of warriors is a good idea. And if they were under the control of the government, then he would accept that. And Nagakura goes to say, I already asked Itakura, so it's a nod back to chapter, I believe it was 17, where Nagakura stops Itakura and basically says, would you like to join the Meiji government? So right there, he's already thought of this before Aritomo Yamagata, which is very interesting. And then he goes on to say, well, I'm just going to completely destroy them if there's no other way around it. And he's like, how are you going to do that? And he's like, I'm going to break the logistical system and basically overwhelm them with numbers. Overwhelm and outnumber is his plan. And he says, with all the military, it's not quality over quantity. Quantity is what gets, is what's gonna win them this battle. But Kenshin disagrees. Kenshin says, you do not know this man. And he's referring to Itakura. You do not know this man. You're underestimating him highly. And I have to agree with Kenshin, right? Because he has fought him personally. And here we have, still the same scene, but Kenshin is like, you're underestimating them. You're thinking about this too much, in the wrong way. This is not the right way to go about it. And then he goes, Himura, I didn't come here for your opinion. I came here to tell you that I've already taken action. And so Kenshin, right here, again, that look on his face, the surprise, again, it goes back to the title page. We see, he says that the Aritomo Yamagata, the body double, is already at Goryokaku, and he's already interrogating the prisoner, Itakura, and then you see all these thousands of soldiers surrounding him. Now, this is a complete trap. Think about it. You got thousands of soldiers here, and one single man. Yes, he is an Ikitosen, as, the Kenkaku Heki call them. But think about it. This man is just like meditating there. He has no weapons whatsoever, and he is just sitting there like a sitting duck. And then you see here, he realizes that is not the real Yamagata. Just by looking at him alone, he's a puppet, so he has nothing to say to him. Not only that, it's an insult to Byakuya that he would actually play him for a fool. So basically he says, I have nothing to say with you, I'm leaving. But before he has a chance, he gets fired on by multiple fire. Several soldiers fire on him. You can see blood gushing out of his body like that. You see that? So basically Byakuya just gets fired on like crazy. You can see him right there. It looks like, oh, Byakuya's done for. No. He is ready for this. He has been prepared for this. He is just letting them fire. He's just basically like a target and just letting them fire on him. And then suddenly you can see there's a little rock here, and this is one of the soldiers behind above where Itakura is, and suddenly a huge massive rock comes and basically just pushes all these soldiers out of the way, and it's Doi. The earth comes out, and basically he says it's time to go back to first of all, he says go back to headquarters, and we need to go to Mount Hakodate. He doesn't even take these soldiers seriously, and then all of these soldiers go flashing by. I mean, like it's almost like the explosion from where he basically come up from the ground, and then you get Gongu. You get Gongu, his comrade right here, along with Amachi. So now you got the backup of Itakura. Obviously, it was all a setup. He set them all up. It was a trap. He set the trap. He was all alone. He set himself up. He basically became a target, but he was doing that all to basically show them how weak and inferior they are. I thought that was really cool. A really great way to introduce the team about to battle Kenshin's group. And of course, Kenshin stands up and opens the door, and he's like, we gotta go. We gotta stop the carnage. I thought that was a really great way to end the chapter. Really good stuff. I thought this chapter was very good. It was very informative. We learned a lot, like I said. You know, you got the nod back to Okubo and his assassination. We learned a little bit more about Yamagata and his body doubles. We learned that Saito, more about Saito and the thinking back to Toshi-san and Hijikata, seeing that portrait again. That was really great. The whole point with Yamagata's plan and, using numbers to overwhelm, but then the Kinkaku Heki lay the trap. They were all ready for them. So that just shows that, this military power and expansion and the wealth, national wealth that the Meiji era is, pushing for, is not going to be sufficient enough to take out the Kinkaku Heki. So it's got to be the people from the Bakamatsu. It's got to be the people that Kenshin has recruited for his team, along with Nagakura, Saito, Kenshin, and all the Juppongatana. Obviously, Saito is sidelined right now, but it's got to be them to stop them. So I thought this was a pretty good chapter. I hope you guys enjoyed, and hopefully you learned something new that you didn't know about the chapter. Hopefully this also gives some great discussion questions for my next video. Anyways, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed, and yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one.